It is evening after supper. From outside, we hear the sound of children playing. The grown-ups, with the exception of Mr. Van Daan, are all in the main room. Miss Frank is doing some mending. Miss Van Daan is reading a fashion magazine. Mr. Frank is going over some business accounts. Dussel, in his dentist jacket, is pacing up and down, impatient to get into his bedroom. Mr. Van Daan is upstairs working on a piece of embroidery in the embroidery frame. In his room, Peter is sitting before the mirror, smoothing his hair. As the scene goes on, he puts on his tie, brushes his coat, and puts it on, preparing himself meticulously for a visit from Anne. On his wall are now hung some of Anne's motion picture stars. In her room, Anne is too getting dressed. She stands before the mirror in her slip, trying various ways of dressing her hair. Margot is seated on the sofa, hemming a skirt for Anne to wear. In the main room, Dussel can stand it no longer. He comes over on the door of his and Anne's bedroom. Dussel walks away furious, sitting down and burying his head in his hands. Anne turns to Margot.
How's that look?
It's fine.
You didn't even look.
Of course I did. It's fine.
Am I terribly ugly?
Oh, stop fishing.
No, tell me.
You've got nice eyes and a lot of animation, and
A little vague, aren't you?
She reaches over and takes the brassiere out of Margot's sewing basket. Outside, Mrs. Frank, feeling sorry for Dussel, comes over, knocking at the girl's door. Outside,
May I come in?
come in, Mother.
shutting the door behind her.
The patient to get in here. Heavens, he takes the room for the entire day. I'm in again tonight to see Peter. That is my intention. Spent a great deal of time in there today. I was in there exactly twice today. Once to get a dictionary and 3/4 of an hour before supper. Aren't you afraid of disturbing him? Mother, I have some intuition. Do this much, and please don't shut the door when you go in. You sound like Miss Van Daan.
He throws the brassiere back in Margot's sewing basket and picks up her blouse, putting it on.
No, I don't mean to suggest anything wrong. You don't need to expose yourself to criticism that would give Mrs. Van Daan a reason to be unpleasant. Miss Van Daan doesn't need an opportunity to be unpleasant. I'm worrying about Mr. Kraler. This is just one more thing. I'm sorry, Mother. I'm going to Peter's room. I'm not going to let Petronella Van Daan spoil our friendship.
Miss Frank hesitates for a second, then goes out, closing the door after her. She gets a pack of playing cards and sits at the center table, playing solitaire. In Anne's room, Margot hands the finished skirt to Anne. As Anne is putting it on, Margot takes off her high-heeled shoes, stuffs paper in the toes so that Anne can wear it.
Why don't you two talk in the main room? It's like a lot of trouble. It's hard on Mother having to listen to his remarks from Miss Van Daan and not say a word.
Why doesn't she say a word? I think it's ridiculous for her to take it.
I don't understand Mother at all, do you? She can't talk back. She's not like you. It's just not in her nature to fight back.
Anyway, the only one I worry about is you. I feel awfully guilty about
She
you.
sits on the stool near Margot, putting on Margot's high-heeled shoes.
Bow.
You don't feel badly, really, truly? You're not jealous?
Of course I'm jealous. Jealous that you've got something to get up for in the morning. But jealous about you, Peter? No.
Anne goes back to the mirror.
Maybe there's nothing to be jealous of. Maybe he doesn't really like me. Maybe I'm just taking the place of his cat.
She picks up a pair of short white gloves, putting them on.
Would you like to come with us?
I have a book.
The sound of children playing outside fades out. In the main room, Dussel can stand it no longer. He jumps up, going to the bedroom door and knocking sharply.
No. Will you please let me in my room? Just a minute, dear Mr. Dussel. Well, here I go to run the gambit.
Starts out, followed by Margot, as she appears sarcastic.
Thank you so much.
Dussel goes into his main room. Anne goes to Peter's room, passing Miss Van Daan and her parents at the center table.
Anne won't stay late. She's going to bed promptly at night, aren't you, Anne? Mother, may we go now?
Are you asking me? I didn't know I had anything to say about it.
The chimes, Anne, dear.
The two young people go off into Peter's room, shutting the door behind them.
In my day, it was the boys who called on the girls, not the girls who called on the boys.
You know how young people like to feel that they have secrets. Peter's room is the only place where they can talk.
I don't know what they called it when I was young.
Miss Van Daan goes off into the bathroom. Margot settles down to read her book. Mr. Frank puts his papers away and brings a chess game to the center table. He and Miss Frank start playing. In Peter's room, Anne speaks to Peter, indignant and humiliated.
Aren't they awful? Aren't they impossible? Treating as if we're still in the nursery.
Don't let it bother you. It doesn't bother me.
As Anne and Peter go on to talk about life, their visit has come to an end, and Anne must go to her room.
9 o'clock, I have to go.
That's right.
Good night. I like to come back with my diary and go over a few things.
What type of thing?
I thought you were nothing, just the way you thought about me.
Did you change your mind the way I changed my mind about you?
Well, you'll see.
For a second, Anne stands looking up at Peter, longing for him to kiss her. As he makes no move, she turns away. Then suddenly, Anne walks out dazed. She stands for a minute, her back to the people in the main room. As she regains her poise, she goes to her mother and father and Margot. Silently kissing them, they murmur their good nights to her. Then she hurries off into her room. Miss Van Daan looks after her, and then looks over at Peter's room. Her suspicions are confirmed.
By the time you know each other so well that if anyone starts to tell a story, the rest of us can finish one. We're having to cut down still further on our meals. What makes it worse, the rats have been at work all day. They've carried off some of our precious food. Even Mr. Dussel wishes now that Mushki was here. Thursday, the 12th of April, 1944. Invasion fear is mounting every day. Neeb tells us that people outside think of nothing else. For myself, life has become much more pleasant. I often go to Peter's room after supper. Oh, don't think I'm in love, because I'm not. But it does make life more bearable to have someone with whom you can exchange views. No more tonight. P.S. I must be honest. I must confess that I actually live for the next meeting. Is there anything lovelier than to sit under the skylight and feel the sun on your cheeks? And have a darling boy in your arms. I admit now that I'm glad that the Van Daans had a son and now a daughter. I've outgrown another dress. That's a third. I'm having to wear Margot's clothes. After all, I'm working hard on my French and now reading La Belle Nevers.